East Lansdowne is the kind of Pennsylvania borough most people pass without noticing. 3 short blocks of row homes, a single traffic light, and towering oaks whose roots heave the sidewalks just enough to trip you if you forget to watch your step. On Lewis Avenue, the McLaughlin Low household stood out only because Brittany kept planters of red geraniums on every windowsill, even in February. That small splash of color felt like defiance against the gray mid-Atlantic winter, and neighbors often nodded in approval when they walked their dogs past the corner lot. Inside the 2-story brick home lived 7 people spanning 2 generations and 2 cultures. Xuong Lei, 51, emigrated from Vietnam as a child in the early 1980s, chasing the American dream that begins with backbreaking work and ends, if you're lucky, with a mortgage paid off before retirement. He met Brittany McLaughlin during a community college accounting class. Her laugh, he would later say, sounded like Christmas morning. They married in 2005, and she hyphenated their last names as a bridge between her Scotch-Irish roots and his Southeast Asian heritage. Their children, Natalia, 17, Nikayla, 13, and Xavier, 10, embodied that blend, navigating Vietnamese Lunar New Year celebrations and 4th of July cookouts with equal ease. The household expanded 2 years ago when Xuong's younger brother, 43-year-old Can Van Lay, moved in after a job layoff in Ohio. Can was quiet, reflexively polite, and fiercely protective of his nieces and nephew. He took the attic bedroom, painted it seafoam green, and promised it was temporary, just until he got back on his feet. Yet successes proved elusive. Construction gigs dried up, transportation bills grew, and Can, that once dependable uncle who taught Xavier to ride a bike, started drifting into tense silences during dinner, picking at his plate rather than finishing Brittany's beef pho. Wednesday, February 7th dawned unremarkably. A light snow dusted the garbage cans left at the curb, and school buses hissed along the slick streets. Natalia joked about senior prom dresses in a group chat while inhaling toaster waffles. Nikayla practiced scales on her violin before class. Xavier explained the rules of Foursquare to Can, who ruffled the boy's hair but seemed distracted. Brittany kissed each child twice, habit, learned from her grandmother, and reminded Natalia to text when track practice ended. Xuong hurried out at 7:15 a.m. for his shift at a packaging plant near the airport, carving a heart in the fogged windshield for Brittany to discover later. By mid-afternoon, snow turned to sleet. Brittany clocked out from her part-time job at the borough library and headed home to start supper, lemongrass chicken marinating beside macaroni and cheese, because Xavier insisted on both. Can returned shortly after, shoulders dusted with ice crystals, expression unreadable. According to phone logs pieced together later, he placed 2 brief calls minutes apart, one to a payday loan office, the other to an unknown number that never answered. Surveillance footage would show him buying a single gallon of gasoline at a Sunoco station at 3:09 p.m., paying cash, and stowing the container under his coat before driving the 4 blocks back to Lewis Avenue. At 3:32 p.m., Natalia's location pinged her parents' shared family tracking app as home. Track practice had ended early due to weather, and she'd caught a ride from a friend. 5 minutes later, a Ring doorbell across the street recorded the hollow pop of a front door slamming, followed by muffled voices rising in argument. Neighbors going about their routines barely noticed. Shouting sometimes drifted from that house since Can moved in, but none expected gunfire. The first shot came at 3:40 p.m., ripping through the hush of sleet and slicing the afternoon like a snapped guitar string. A neighbor 3 doors down thought someone dropped a heavy board. Another assumed car backfire. Inside the Low house, pandemonium erupted. Investigators believe Can confronted his brother on the staircase landing, weapon gripped in trembling hands, argument escalating over money, Can's debts, Xuong's refusal to co-sign another loan, perhaps something deeper none will ever fully know. The Diamondback semi-automatic pistol bucked once, twice, 3 times. Shuang collapsed, mortally wounded. Brittany, rushing from the kitchen, was struck next. Natalia tried to shield her siblings. A bullet pierced her chest. Nikayla and Xavier fled toward the back bedroom as smoke began curling up the stairwell. Can had already doused the curtains and hallway runner with gasoline, a decision both calculated and frantic. At 3:44 p.m., Delaware County dispatchers received a panicked 911 call. An elderly woman shouting that her son had a gun and fire was everywhere. That caller, 80-year-old Chin Lee, the shooter's mother visiting for the week, escaped barefoot into sleet. Clutching the phone until officers arrived, she pounded on the neighbor's door, screaming, "He shot them! My babies!" Inside the house, Can fired at least 6 more rounds. Whether all found their marks remains disputed. Medical examiners would later determine one child succumbed to smoke inhalation rather than direct gunshot. The first responding officers, John Meehan and David Skyaza, parked halfway up the block, mindful of potential trapped civilians. As they approached, flames punched through an upstairs window, glass spattering onto the sidewalk like molten jewels. Gunfire erupted from behind a shattered picture window. Both officers were hit, Meehan in the arm, Shiatsa in the leg. They radioed "Officer down" while crawling behind a frozen Subaru for cover, their breaths pluming white in the frigid air. Minutes stretched elastic. Backup units established a perimeter. Firefighters waited helplessly for the shooting to stop. Hoses slack against their rigs. Sleet thickened into heavy snow, hissing when it touched flames now licking the slate roof. Ammunition inside the house began to cook off, cracking like popcorn. By 4:10 p.m., the second floor collapsed, timbers roaring into an inferno that fire crews could finally confront once SWAT declared no more shots fired. They pumped 15,000 gallons of water through what was left of the frame, streaming streams turning instantly to steam. When dusk settled, only a skeletal silhouette remained, blackened joists clawing at a slate-gray sky. Melted geranium planters lay shattered on the stoop, their red shards a brutal echo of what once signaled warmth. Investigators would work through the night, their floodlights painting the ruins a sickly yellow, while the borough shivered behind police tape, wondering how an ordinary Wednesday metastasized into carnage. Snow kept falling, muffling every siren and command as flashing lights converged on Lewis Avenue. By 4:12 p.m., a full tactical response team had arrived, spreading shields and Kevlar blue bodies across the slick asphalt. They found Chin Lei, the family matriarch, shaking beneath a mylar blanket in a neighbor's foyer. Her voice broke in staccato bursts of Vietnamese and English. My son killed them. Fire everywhere." Medics ushered her onto a stretcher, and she kept repeating a single phrase, "Jungbo Chow, don't abandon my grandchildren," even though the children she meant were already inside the inferno or beyond saving. Command transferred to Lieutenant Karen Torres, who crouched behind an armored Bearcat and assessed a scene that defied normal protocols. Smoke belched from the upstairs windows, shifting in the wind like a living thing. Sporadic pops sounded from inside, sometimes muffled, sometimes sharp. A ballistics tech whispered that ammunition was cooking off, each cartridge detonating as heat reached its flash point. It meant no one could confirm whether the shooter was still alive or the gunfire simply mechanical eruptions from a house already surrendering to flames. Torres radioed firefighters to stand by. Water streams might push burning embers toward neighboring row homes. Worse, obscuring smoke could give a potential shooter cover. She ordered snipers to rooftop positions, though none had a clear view, only the wavering heat signatures of furniture combusting behind shattered glass. To the left, Officers Meehan and Skiatsa lay behind the Subaru, pale but conscious. Paramedics dragged them to safety under a hail of icy pellets that hissed on body armor. Meehan muttered, "It was the brother. I saw his face in the window. His radio crackled as blood seeped through a makeshift tourniquet. Inside the Bearcat, dispatch relayed that Delaware County EMS had patched through a second 911 call from a teenage voice, faint, breathless. The line was open but silent, traced to Natalia's cell. Signal triangulation showed it still inside the house. First floor, southeast corner. Hope flickered. Maybe one child was alive. Torres's jaw tightened. She'd seen miracles in worse conditions, yet physics rarely bent for human yearning. Still, protocol demanded a rescue attempt once suppression could start. At 4:26 p.m., flames exploded through the roof ridge, sending cedar shingles skittering across the street like fiery playing cards. The heat index spiked. Snowflakes vaporized inches above ground. Torres finally gave firefighters the green light. Two ladder companies advanced, nozzles roaring, water turning to steam so fast it created a blinding white veil. Through that scalding curtain, a 6-person entry team breached the front door only to retreat seconds later, coughing. Their thermal cameras blinded by heat bloom. Visibility, 0. Interior temperature, over 1,000 degrees Fahrenheit. Any survivable pocket of air had long vanished. By 4:45 p.m., structural integrity went from questionable to doomed. Beams groaned like an old ship in a storm, and then part of the second-floor hallway collapsed, sending a cascade of embers onto the living room couch where Christmas stockings still hung. The stockings ignited, sparks dancing through the doorway in cruel imitation of holiday cheer. A firefighter shouted, "Pull back!" just before the staircase gave way, thundering into the basement. Rumbling shook nearby windows. An elderly man slipped on his porch while filming the chaos, cell phone video later looping on every regional news feed. It took 90 minutes, 20,000 gallons of water, and an excavator claw to quell the main body of fire. Darkness settled, broken by generator hum and floodlights that made snowflakes sparkle like glass dust over the smoldering ruin. Investigators from the county arson unit and medical examiner's office assembled, their breath visible in the cold. They donned Tyvek suits, hard hats, and respirators before stepping onto what was once the Lowe family's living room floor, now a blackened lattice of joists hanging over a pit of ash. Teams moved methodically, marking grid squares with orange twine, sifting debris into galvanized tubs that clanged with each lump of char or bone fragment. At 9:12 p.m., a detective lifted a scorched Diamondback DB-15 pistol, chamber empty, barrel warped from heat. Near it lay a partially melted red plastic gas can, confirming suspicions that accelerant fueled the blaze. Minutes later, searchers uncovered the first set of remains. A small frame consistent with a preteen female, curled beneath a collapsed desk. Identification would come later, but seasoned eyes recognized a child's sneaker sole, fused to bone. Meanwhile, hospital corridors buzzed. Meehan underwent surgery to remove a .223 caliber round from his triceps. Shiatsa received a titanium rod in his shattered tibia. Media thronged the lobby, flashing microphones like weapons of a different sort. The police chief delivered a clipped statement, active scene, 5 civilians presumed dead, shooter among them, no threat to public. He praised bravery, asked for prayers, and dodged the inevitable why. There was no why, only what, when, and the grief that crawls through every answer. Thursday morning, sunrise revealed a ghost house, just 2 standing walls and the yawning mouth of a basement filled with icicles formed from firefighting runoff. County engineers declared the structure unstable. A yellow excavator rumbled into position, its steel jaws gripping the remaining brick like a dinosaur on prey. Neighbors watched from behind police lines as the machine chewed downward, each crunch a funeral drumbeat. Among the onlookers, a school bus slowed. Children pressed faces to windows, seeing ribbons of caution tape flutter like spectral fingers. Before demolition progressed, recovery crews pulled 5 more body bags from the rubble. DNA swabs and dental records later confirmed identities: Shuang, Brittany, Natalia, Nikayla, and Xavier. Only Can's torso could be distinguished separately, fused to twisted mattress springs in the attic corner. The coroner would declare 5 deaths by gunshot, 1 by smoke inhalation. Xavier, whose lungs were too young to endure the toxic stew of burning drywall and plastic toys. That afternoon, District Attorney Jack Stolzheimer held a press briefing at Borough Hall, flags at half-staff behind him. He outlined a preliminary timeline: an argument escalating into homicide, ammunition discharged until empty, fire set as cover or maybe self-immolation, motive undetermined. No legal history of domestic violence, only whispers of debt and depression. He confirmed 2 officers wounded but stable and commended their quick thinking, crediting them with preventing further casualties among neighbors. Reporters pushed for details. Was the gun legal? Did mental health services ever intervene? But many questions remained sealed behind the phrasing "ongoing investigation." Grief moved outward in ripples. East Lansdowne Baptist Church opened its fellowship hall for vigils, candles flickering beneath a photo collage of the family. Brittany in a Santa hat, Natalia wearing honor roll cords, Nikayla mid-bow after a violin recital, Xavier squinting at Niagara Falls spray, Shuang holding a trout on a summer fishing trip. A handwritten sign read, "Love lives here still." Mourners brought so many casseroles that volunteers filled chest freezers, then redirected donations to the Delaware County Victim Assistance Fund. By evening, a GoFundMe in Brittany's maiden name had surpassed $100,000, with comments from as far away as Ho Chi Minh City and Glasgow. Yet sorrow shared space with anger. Social media unfurled blame in every direction: lax gun laws, lack of mental health care, immigrant stress, American individualism. A county council meeting turned contentious when one resident accused officials of ignoring warning signs. Another shouted that tragedy doesn't need a cultural explanation. Evil is evil. Voices overlapped until the chairwoman called for recess, gavel echoing like another gunshot none wanted to hear. By the weekend, the charred lot on Lewis Avenue was a crater of memories. Snow melted into muddy ash, and city workers erected a chain-link fence wrapped in black mesh. Through gaps, children's toys appeared: a stuffed Pikachu charcoaled at the edges, a half-melted violin bow, the metal chassis of a toy dump truck. Each relic felt like a final, unbearable footnote to the family story. Strangers left roses in the chain links. Someone hung a Vietnamese flag beside an Irish tricolor, both whipping in winter gusts. The autopsy reports landed on Detective Olivia Perez's desk like concrete blocks, 6 manila folders still smelling faintly of smoke. Each told its own brutal story: bullet trajectories angled slightly upward, powder tattooing that suggested close range, soot in airways indicating some victims were still breathing when flames rose. Forensic pathologists concluded Shuang had been shot twice in the chest, Brittany once in the abdomen, Natalia through the clavicle. Nikayla's wound pattern reflected a hurried angle, the bullet grazing her left scapula before lodging in her lung. Xavier showed no bullet wounds. He succumbed to superheated toxic gases. Can's injuries were consistent with self-inflicted gunshot under the chin, the muzzle so close it left a star-shaped tear. Taken together, the data mapped a frantic indoor chase. Can firing as family members scrambled for exits, then firing once more at himself after realizing the blaze he'd ignited was already devouring the house. Ballistics labs traced every recovered shell casing to a single Diamondback DB-15 rifle, purchased legally by Can at a Delaware gun shop in July 2023. He'd passed the background check without issue. No criminal record, no flagged mental health hold. Store footage showed him chatting amiably with the clerk, selecting the affordable model over Preischer AR platforms. He bought 2 30-round magazines and a box of .223 Remington hollow points, ammunition that would shear through drywall yet fragment inside human tissue, maximizing damage. Investigators determined Can had 23 rounds left when the fire consumed the rifle, meaning he fired 7 times inside the home. The math fit the coroner's count: 5 family members, 1 self-inflicted shot, plus a stray round discovered in the living room ceiling. Detectives next examined motive. Financial records painted a bleaker picture by the day. Can owed nearly $18,000 across 4 high-interest payday loans, rolling them over each month while interest ballooned to triple digits. His checking account dipped below zero 6 times in January alone. Credit card bills revealed online casino charges at 2 a.m., 3 a.m., sometimes 6 sessions in a single night. There were Uber trips tagged to strip mall liquor stores just before closing time. Shuang's accounts, by contrast, showed careful budgeting, automated mortgage payments, college fund deposits. 3 weeks before the tragedy, Shuang moved $4,000 from savings into an emergency fund labeled Uncle's Rehab Loan. Brittany messaged him that afternoon, "Bless you for trying, but we can't keep bailing him out." Shuang replied, "Last chance," he promised. Buried inside Can's bedroom debris, investigators found a grease-stained notebook, pages fusing together yet salvageable, near the spine. On one side were scribbles, lottery numbers circled, Vietnamese phrases like "May man, good luck," and on the last entry, "They don't believe in me. They think I'm less. I'll show them I'm more." The sentence ended abruptly, the ink smeared as if by a trembling hand. Psychologists later debated whether that note constituted a manifesto or the fragmented outcry of someone losing his grip on reality. Parallel to the forensic grind, the community engaged in its own reckoning. East Lansdowne High organized a memorial basketball game because Natalia had played varsity guard. The bleachers filled with students wearing ribbons that blended the family's heritages: green, white, and orange for Brittany's Irish roots, yellow star on red for the Vietnamese flag. A violin ensemble performed Danny Boy, followed by Ho Do, a Vietnamese folk chant. The poignant mashup left parents wiping tears with coat sleeves. During halftime, the scoreboard froze at 51-43, numerals chosen to mirror the parents' ages, 51 and 43, a silent testament to lives truncated mid-sentence. Counselors visited Xavier's elementary school, where classmates built a Lego tower in his memory, 1 brick for each of his favorite things: Pokemon, cinnamon toast, the color orange. They asked the counselor why someone would hurt a kid who always shared crayons. The counselor tried to explain complicated grown-up feelings. The children countered with a simpler verdict: he should have used words, not fire. Online discourse was less gentle. Comment threads exploded with blame. Some targeted immigrant stress, claiming Can faced cultural shame about debt. Others blamed lax gun laws that let desperation wield a semi-automatic. A local talk radio host argued mental health cuts were the real culprit. A city council candidate used the tragedy to campaign for stricter zoning on payday loan storefronts. Amid the cacophony, Brittany's sister Lauren posted a single plea: "Please remember, human beings lived in that house. Don't reduce them to talking points." Her post garnered thousands of hearts, yet trolls still surfaced beneath, arguing over which political party bore responsibility. Investigators also chased a more personal thread: family dynamics inside the crowded home. Interviews with friends revealed subtle tensions. Natalia once confided to her best friend that Uncle Can creeped her out after he burst into tears at the dinner table, rambling about wasted opportunities. Brittany's co-worker recalled Brittany mentioning sleepless nights. Can walks the halls till dawn, murmuring in Vietnamese. Yet no one reported physical threats. Child Protective Services had no active case. Police logs showed a single welfare call months earlier after neighbors heard shouting, but officers found no probable cause for arrest. Still, hindsight sharpened every shadow. Surveillance from the Sunoco station resurfaced. Can buying gasoline, then staring into space for 20 seconds before jerking back to the clerk's question. A cashier remembered his eyes were like nobody was home. Toxicology later found high blood ethanol levels and traces of zolpidem, a sedative. Experts testified that mixing alcohol and sleep medication can trigger dissociative aggression, though rarely on such a catastrophic scale. In late March, the district attorney convened a press conference to declare the investigation officially closed. With the perpetrator deceased, no prosecution would follow, but findings were laid bare. Premeditation evidenced by gasoline purchase, escalating financial ruin, possible substance-induced psychosis. The report acknowledged systemic questions, mental health gaps, easy access to rapid-fire weapons, but concluded the ultimate catalyst was a complex intersection of distress, shame, and impulsive violence. Closure, however, proved a mirage. The surviving grandmother, Chin Lei, filed a civil petition against the payday loan company for predatory practices contributing to mental destabilization. Advocacy groups seized on her suit, staging rallies outside state capitol steps, demanding 36% interest caps. Meanwhile, the Borough Council approved a resolution to demolish the fire-scarred lot and create a pocket park. Landscape architects proposed cherry trees, a nod to both Vietnamese hoa and ashjao and Brittany's favorite spring blooms. Funding came swiftly. Grief often opens wallets where regular fundraising stumbles, yet not everyone welcomed transformation. One neighbor taped a sign to the chain-link fence, "Don't pave over pain, we haven't healed." On rainy nights, the sign drooped, letters bleeding like watercolor sorrow. Counselors promised a reflective plaque, a wrought iron bench. Healing, they argued, requires a place to sit with memories. Throughout April, cranes delivered soil, workers laid sod, and new saplings trembled in cold winds. On dedication day, children scattered rose petals where the front porch once stood. Detectives attended in plain clothes, heads bowed. Reverend Lam, from the Vietnamese Catholic Church, read Psalm 34:18. The Lord is close to the broken-hearted. Pastor Quinn from Brittany's Methodist congregation followed with an Irish blessing. Dual traditions wove into a single lament, and for a moment the wind fell silent around Lewis Avenue, as though even nature paused to listen. April 7th dawned with a softness that seemed almost intentional, as though the weather itself wished to cradle East Lansdowne in gentler arms. 1 year had passed since flames swallowed the McLaughlin Lee home, yet the street no longer smelled of ash. Instead, it carried the faint perfume of cherry blossoms from a modest pocket park now occupying the once charred lot. At 9 o'clock, townspeople gathered for the dedication ceremony. Folding chairs lined a brick path, their metal legs damp with spring dew. At the front stood a low granite plinth engraved with 6 names: Shuong, Brittany, Natalia, Nikayla, Xavier, and Can, positioned deliberately close together because tragedy had bound them forever, even as it tore them apart. Reverend Lam opened with a prayer in Vietnamese. Pastor Quinn followed with an Irish hymn. Between the two clergymen sat Chin Lei, now 81. Wrapped in a shawl Natalia once wore to winter choir concerts. Each line of the ceremony landed in her eyes like a pebble dropped into still water. Ripples of grief, then calm. When it came time to cut the ribbon, Chin's hands trembled. The mayor guided the scissors, and the ribbon fell in silence. Children released 6 monarch butterflies, 1 for each family member, and everyone watched them hover over the new cherry trees before drifting skyward in orange flashes of fragile resilience. Behind the platform, a wrought iron bench faced a bed of red geraniums, Brittany's favorite, Beneath the bench lay a time capsule sealed with notes from classmates, track ribbons, violin rosin, a Lego Pikachu, and a faded photograph of Shuang holding a trout. The capsule was set to be opened in 25 years, a span chosen to represent the length of time Daniel Meehan would carry the titanium rod in his arm and David Schiazza would walk on a mended leg, physical reminders of the day they crawled toward gunfire without hesitation. Both officers sat in the crowd, dress uniforms crisp, each nodding quietly as speakers thanked them for service, rendered at immeasurable cost. If the pocket park was the physical heart of remembrance, the legal legacy beat inside the Pennsylvania Capitol. 2 months earlier, Governor Whitman had signed the McLaughlin-Lee Consumer Protection Act, capping payday loan interest at 36% and mandating mental health screenings for firearm purchasers placed on job loss registries. The bill passed with unusual bipartisan speed. Lawmakers credited Chinley's tearful testimony when she described watching her son unravel under debts that multiplied like mold in darkness. Newspapers hailed the act as a rare instance of grief-forging cooperation, though cynics predicted loopholes would emerge. For East Lansdowne, the law's passage offered something more elemental, a sense that the family's suffering might prevent another flame from igniting in someone else's living room. Meanwhile, the scholarship fund in Natalia's name reached its first milestone. At the high school awards night in May, the gym's fluorescent lights hummed overhead as Coach Arias announced the winner, Kiara Johnson, a junior guard who practiced free throws in the dark. After everyone left, the way Natalia once did, Kiara accepted a framed certificate and a track baton painted in the hybrid ribbon colors. She promised to run her next season for Nat, then added voice cracking, and for everyone who still dreams in both English and Vietnamese. Applause rose, echoing off rafters still decorated with basketball banners that bore the year 2024, but would carry asterisks in the record books, seasons abbreviated by mourning, yet finished in Natalia's honor. Down the road at Xavier's former elementary school, a bright mural now spanned the hallway outside the library. Cartoon planets orbiting around a smiling boy in an orange spacesuit. Students called it Zav's Galaxy. Once a month, teachers rolled out beanbags beneath the planets and held kindness circles, discussing empathy, conflict resolution, and how to ask for help before anger hardens into violence. Parents were invited too. One mother confessed she'd started leaving notes of encouragement in her brother's lunchbox after learning about warning signs of depression. Small gestures, perhaps, but each one a stitch in the social fabric torn by last year's bullets. Even Can's memory found a precarious place in the collective narrative. During a June mental health symposium, Dr. Nguyen, a trauma psychiatrist, presented a paper titled The Unseen Spiral, Debt, Shame, and Diasporic Masculinity. She used Can's case, anonymized, to illustrate how cultural expectations can silence men until desperation erupts. Audience reactions were mixed. Some accused her of excusing evil. Others thanked her for humanizing a villain so that patterns might be recognized sooner. Dr. Nguyen ended with a quote from Toni Morrison: "You can't erase what you know. You can only add to it." The room sat in contemplative quiet, each attendee reckoning with the uneasy truth that prevention begins where judgment pauses. Summer brought teenagers to the pocket park for pickup soccer games. Cherry trees cast speckled shade on grass whose roots, threaded through soil, still laced with memories of smoke. In August, Brittany's friend Marisol organized the first Geranium Day. Volunteers planted crimson blooms along every windowsill in the borough. Red flickered like candlelight on streets once dimmed by grief. Marisol handed Chinley a trowel. Together they pressed a final plant into earth near the granite plinth. Chin whispered, "Thank you, Con," using the Vietnamese term for child. her voice simultaneously addressing Marisol and Brittany, the daughter-in-law who once taught her the English word hope by writing it on a recipe card and sticking it to the fridge. As autumn settled, leaves rustled like soft applause at each new sign of recovery. The violin chair in the middle school orchestra remained ceremonially empty for one semester in memory of Nikayla. Then in October, it was filled by a shy sixth grader who'd practiced all summer to audition because Nak would want the music to keep going. During the first concert, she wore a ribbon pinned to her black dress and paused before her solo, eyes closed as though borrowing courage from the quiet girl who'd once played the same part. Notes rose, trembling but true, carrying through the auditorium, until even the stoic band director wiped his glasses. In December, snowflakes dusted the cherry branches, mirroring the day of the fire, but without sirens. The town hosted a lantern lighting ceremony by Darby Creek. Families scribbled wishes on rice paper globes, some for gun law reform, some for mental health funding, many simply for peace that lasts. At dusk, lanterns lifted in a glowing procession, their reflections shimmering across water. Chinle released two, one inscribed with her grandchildren's names in careful block letters, the other bearing cans in thin, wavering script. Forgiveness, like grief, arrived in uneven breaths. Toward year's end, a local journalist asked Mayor Deakins when the town would be healed. He paused, glancing toward the pocket park, visible from his office window. Children were chasing each other around the cherry trees, weaving laughter through branches that once framed smoke. Healing isn't a finish line, he said. It's breathing in, breathing out, and planting something that outlives the sorrow. And so East Lansdowne continued to breathe, in through crimson geraniums, out through violin chords, in through scholarship letters, out through lantern light. The McLaughlin Lee tragedy had seared its mark, but it also planted seeds, policies, friendships, conversations that could, with tending, shade the next generation from similar flames. Beneath the steady gaze of the granite plinth, cherry blossoms would return each spring, petals drifting like whispers onto the bench where visitors sat to remember not just how a family died, but how a community chose to live forward, together, vigilant, and tender with one another's fragility. Thank you for spending time with the Witness Record. If this story touched you, please like, share, and subscribe, and ring the bell so you never miss our next journey into truth and remembrance.